Hey, this is Seth, and in this video, I'm going to answer the question, how would a recession affect digital marketing jobs? And I'm going to use statistics, facts, and my 6 years of experience helping people get hired in the field of digital marketing to answer this question to the best of my ability. Now, I'm not a fortune teller, I can't predict the future, and I'm not an economist, but I am very experienced in this field, and I want to give you some insights that will put your mind at ease, because digital marketing remains one of the most in-demand skill sets on the planet, and it will continue to be so even if there is a recession. You see, guys, every company has got to advertise, and that's one of the reasons digital marketing has exploded in the last few years. You know, companies slowly over the last 10 years, companies have stopped advertising on traditional mediums like, TV, radio, newspapers, and they've been going onto the internet. During the pandemic, it forced almost every company that was resisting this change to get onto the internet, and revenues of these advertising platforms exploded. The number of jobs in digital marketing exploded. It went from, in 2019, we had about 70,000 open jobs in the US on LinkedIn every single day in digital marketing. That was the highest it had ever been. In 2017, when I started teaching, it was about 20,000 jobs a day. So in 2 years, it went up from 20,000 to 70,000. Then during the pandemic, it went back down to about 20,000. And then after the pandemic, and now, it's at about 200,000 open jobs a day, which is 10 times what it was in 2017. And about 3 to 4 times what it was in 2019 before the pandemic happened. So what I'm trying to explain here is that the market has already grown huge. It's already bigger than it ever was. So let's say there's a huge recession and everything stops in the economy, and a lot of those jobs disappear. It would have, even if 50% of those jobs disappeared, you'd still have 100,000 open positions, which is more than it had ever been previously. Let's say it's a disastrous recession and 90% of the jobs disappear. They're just gone. This would also mean, by the way, guys, that this would be more than a recession, almost a depression. But let's say 90% of the existing jobs disappeared. Then we would be back to about 20,000 jobs a day, which is what it was in 2017, and things were very good back then. And people were getting jobs left and right, people who were taking my course. So I'm trying to explain to you is that the market is already so big that even though there may be a slowdown in some advertising and some jobs may be lost, but there's still going to be plenty of jobs. And there's also, one of the things you have to look at, because people tend to get they don't think these things through clearly, they don't think in terms of detail, is that there are many different verticals within marketing. So when the pandemic hit in 2020, the whole economy shut down, and it was terrible initially for everybody. Then things started to ramp back up a little bit, but let's say you were a dentist's office, and let's say you were working for an e-commerce agency. You had two very different experiences. Now, if you work for a dentist's office during the pandemic, it was very unusual because dentists are normally an evergreen business. Everybody needs help with their teeth all the time. But during the pandemic, dentist's office had to close, so they couldn't advertise at all because they literally couldn't take clients or patients. So all the agencies that were advertising for dentists, they laid everyone off. They didn't have any business, and that really stunk if you were working for one of those companies. But what could you do? Because you have the skill set, you could pivot. Now, e-commerce companies, on the other hand, had the opposite. Because everyone was forced to go online, even those businesses that have been holding out, e-commerce blew up during the pandemic. And there were people who were hiring like crazy. They didn't have enough people to handle the accounts. They were breaking records, and it was wild. So it was two very different experiences based on what vertical you were in. And the same thing will happen during a recession. While recession tends to hit everybody to a certain extent, certain industries are going to be hit harder than others. And if you have the fundamental digital marketing skill sets, what that means is your agency may lose a client over here if they're in an industry that gets impacted very badly, but then either they get a new client or you get a new job. It's not like, back in 2007, 2008, when the real estate crashed, if you're a realtor, you're out of a job. Nobody's selling houses, everything stopped and everybody's out. But digital marketing is not like that because, again, there's so many different verticals within marketing. And fundamentally, businesses have to continue advertising even during a recession. They may lower their ad budgets a little, but let's say you are a retailer and 90% of your advertising is on Google. And let's say sales start to slow down. What are you going to do? Stop your advertising completely? That means you'll have zero sales, your company will go bankrupt, everyone gets fired, and everything shuts down. Companies, again, a recession is a slowdown. It's not a depression. What it means is things are slowing down, they're not growing. But you're still spending money, you're still making sales. And that will keep happening during a recession. If there's been study after study shows that companies that continue to advertise during an economic downturn do much, much better when everything reverses. And that's what's going to happen. So I'm going to give you a little economic perspective in a moment. But I also want to direct you to this statistic. Look at Google's ad revenue from the years 2007, 2008, 2009. That was the last time we technically had an actual recession. I remember because I got laid off, right? There were a lot of layoffs. But during that time, 2007, 2008, 2009, Google kept growing. So you may have noticed that between two of those years, the growth was very, very small. It was like 21 billion to 22 billion. And every other year in Google's history, they've grown every year by a lot. But during the recession, they only grew a little. And that's what it's like in digital marketing, guys. It's not like they stopped making money. It's not like people stopped advertising. It didn't go from 21 billion to zero. It went from like 21 billion to 22 billion. And this is one more chart I want to share to really drive home the power of digital versus traditional advertising. So this chart shows digital versus TV advertising spend from really 1999 until about now. And you can see, just look at digital. I mean, it's just, look at the exponential growth and look how stagnant TV spending has been. But here's something I wanted to point out. Look at the year 2008, 2009. Do you see how it went down? It actually went down. TV advertising did in fact go down during the recession, but as I've shown you a couple times, that didn't happen with Google. It went up. I mean, not a lot, but it went up. It didn't go down, and TV went down. And again, that's the difference between traditional and digital. Digital is pervasive, it is trackable, it's efficient, it's a lot cheaper than television, newspaper, radio, and that's another reason why I really think it's, you know, the impact of any potential recession is not going to be as severe as it was at other time with other industries, because like you can see right here, TV down, Google ads up during the same time. Now, our culture is so obsessed with growth that it, again, distorts the perspective of what's actually happening. So actually, earlier this year, I saw a lot of articles saying YouTube advertising is dead and that digital advertising is in trouble and all these things. Like, whoa, what happened? Actually, revenue was up last year. Everything's great. But what actually happened was, like YouTube, for example, in Q1 2022 was projected to be up 25% from the previous year. That was a projection of an expectation. Who the heck knows where these numbers come from? But it was expected to have 25% growth from the previous year. And guess what, guys? It was only 14% growth. And so the analysts are like, but if you're actually like, if you understand business, 14% growth is amazing. I don't know why they expected 25% growth. It's still up from the previous year. And they spun it to make it look like things are bad. And of course, and then the stockholders also, because they want growth, you know, the stock drops a little bit and everybody panics. And it leads to this misperception. Guys, there's still, people are spending billions on YouTube and Facebook. And a similar thing happened with Facebook, where it was up one quarter, then down one quarter, and everybody pounces on it. And the fact of the matter is, these companies are making billions of dollars in revenue, and they need people to manage that advertisement. Companies need people to manage that advertising money. So if you're a stockholder, yeah, you're looking at every little up and down, but in general, we've seen the growth of jobs because companies need people to manage this advertising. And let the stockholders worry about the little ups and downs and the projections and all that nonsense. From a jobs perspective, there is plenty of money being spent. Here's some other little points that just came into my mind. Number one, if there's a slowdown in online advertising, now the people who do stay in the game are they're gonna have a lot of advantages, because digital advertising is all auction and competition based. So the more people competing for a certain market, the higher the cost of the clicks becomes. Now, if people stop advertising, now the people who are left are actually going to have a great opportunity to get cheaper clicks and cheaper traffic, which is why I don't think that, honestly, people aren't going to really leave that much. It's not like there's going to be an exodus of advertisers in a very competitive space. In fact, the more competitive the space, the more pressure there's going to be on those companies to continue advertising and not give up the advantage to their competitors. The second thing is, we've never even talked about profit margins. Now, what if you have one year where you make 10 million in profits and the next year you make 7 million in profits, and then next year maybe you make 5 million in profits? You're still profitable, but your profit margin isn't as great. So you're still able to pay your employees, you're still able to sustain the business, but the profit margin goes up and down. So the same thing happens in digital. You might have a ROAS, return on ad spend, that's like incredible. Maybe you're making 8 ROAS. I mean, you're making 8 times as much money as you spend on ads, which would be incredible. Let's say during a recession, things slow down. Now you're making 6 ROAS, 4 ROAS, even 2 ROAS, you're still making money from your ads. So what will likely happen with a lot of these companies is that they will continue to make sales, they will be slower, and their profits will go down, but they'll still stay in business. It's only certain industries, certain companies where they'll get hit so hard that they'll be forced to lay people off and things like that. Google, Facebook, and YouTube, it's possible during the recession that advertising budgets will slow down. Their profits may go down a bit, and the analysts and the people in the stocks will go, oh my God, it's terrible. Last year they made 200 billion. This year they made 175 billion. It's terrible. They're still making a ton of money, and it's all part of a corrective process that will ultimately will continue to grow once all the kinks get worked out. And the job market, this is a really great place to position yourself, guys, because again, especially during this type of pressure on the market, quality, experienced digital marketers are going to be so much more valuable. And remember, there are still not enough entry-level marketers out there because colleges, even though the digital marketing industry has grown to hundreds of billions of dollars, colleges still treat it like an elective. And just for the sake of scale, literally, there's millions of people graduating with their bachelor's degrees every single year, thousands with their marketing degrees and business degrees. They don't know anything about digital. And this has happened year after year after year, which is why you still have such an advantage. You actually just get the skills, you know the market, you know the demand, you take action, generate experience, show your enthusiasm, and you can get hired even during a recession. And I'll remind you guys that even during the pandemic, when there were only 25,000 open jobs in the US, which was the same as it was in 2017, my students were still getting hired, they were still getting raises, they were still pivoting from one company to another during that time. And the way I look at it is like this. It's like right now, it's like you're in the NBA draft, and you're like the number 5 draft pick, or you're like the highest, you're like so. If you have these skills, you are like so in demand, it's like your number 5 draft pick. But during a recession, what will happen is you're still going to be a draft pick, you're still going to get into the NBA, things are still great, but you might, instead of number 5 draft pick, now you're like number 20 draft pick. It's not terrible. Yeah, there might be a slowdown, it might be a little bit more difficult than it was before, but you're still in the big leagues, you're still in a great thriving industry, and you still have incredible opportunities. So I definitely hope that this video has inspired you and given you some confidence and some perspective. Feel free to leave comments or questions below, and I will see you in the next video.